Are you making thriving choices or surviving choices? Earlier this week, I made a brief video asking that same question. If you had a chance to tune into that video, maybe you've been thinking about thriving or surviving. Really, what is the difference between thriving or surviving? When I think of making a surviving choice, it's a choice that's born out of a reaction, possibly to something that's caught me off guard. But if we go a little bit deeper with what is a surviving choice, it's basically a choice that's born out of a flight response that I am experiencing in the moment by something that has triggered me. Maybe it's activated a belief system or it's activated a fear, and I simply don't have the capacity to handle the frustration that is welling up inside of me. There's the expectation, there's the event, there's my frustration, and I simply am reacting in a way that is working against myself. Now, granted, there may be times where we have to make survive choices. A couple of years ago, I was cycling on a trail, and there, coiled up in the center, was what looked like a timber rattler. I certainly was alerted to its coil, and I certainly wanted to make the choice that was in my best interest, but also in the snake's best interest as well. I didn't head toward it. I actually veered way far to the right to get around it. Now, I would think that that's a survive choice. I certainly was not interested in checking it out. I was interested in getting on my way, and I probably think the snake was too. That could be a survive choice, where it's a difference between my life, my health, my safety, and my wellness. But let's rein that in a minute. Sometimes when we think about our survive choice, we're thinking about that frustration that's welling up and potentially has been building all week long. I get in a nasty feedback loop in my mind. My thoughts aren't right. My thoughts aren't even aligned. And I'm simply looking for relief. I'm looking for comfort. You see, I've convinced myself that if I don't reach out and get that comfort, I can't survive this. Working as a clinician, I hear people's belief systems all the time. It's interesting the things that we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves such things as, I can't get through this. There's no way that I can do this. I don't have the strength to carry on. That's quite a powerful belief, isn't it? You see, what we're really trying to say is, I've encountered something that simply could take the life away from me. So I make a survive choice. Maybe my survive choice is turning to my regular comfort food. And the reason we turn to that is because it works. It works every single time. It gives us the dopamine. It gives us the rush. It comforts us. It helps us feel better. It actually feels like we're in control and that we can do something about that situation. That's a survive choice. It's a fight-flight choice that we are making based on a situation that has triggered that event inside of us. Now, sometimes we're encountered with something that causes us to freeze, and we simply are immobilized and we don't know what to do. That too is a survive choice. I want to switch the gears here a little bit and talk about a thrive choice. You see, when I think about a thrive choice, I'm thinking about choices that are in line with my values. They're in line with my goals. They're in line with the vision that I have for my life. You see, the thrive choice propels me forward. It doesn't keep me stuck. It doesn't regress me. It helps me move toward a preferred future. It helps me do the next right thing in the moment. You see, the interesting thing is that the future hasn't been created. It's every step that we take right now in the moment that is creating that preferred future for us. A Thrive choice is simply not going to catch me off guard. A Thrive choice is helping me respond to life in a more reasonable, logical way. Now, that all sounds good, doesn't it? How do we get there? Well, often I find that individuals who are leaning more toward Thrive choices, who are responding to life in a reasonable, non-reactive way, tend to have a plan for their life. And they tend to follow that plan. And they tend to know that plan. So in some ways, they're planning for the contingencies that can happen in their life. They are grounded in their values. They know their goals. They know their plans. And they also have people in their life that they connect with on a regular basis that help encourage them and help listen to them and help motivate them. You see, they simply aren't going it alone. They have many checks and balances to help them get to the preferred future that they want to create. Now, what I want to touch on as I'm wrapping up here this evening is something brief that you can put into practice right away. You see, when we think about doing things differently for our life, for some of us, that can be so overwhelming because we've lived in this anxious, reactive environment that we have this belief that we have to tackle everything at once. Well, that's simply anxiety calling, isn't it? Convincing us and tricking us into thinking that we have to do everything at once. But that's simply not true. All that is a formula to overwhelm us and to really keep us stuck in making survive choices. It is simply not sustainable. You know, anytime we start something new in our life, there is a lot of excitement surrounding about it. I mean, we have what's been called uninformed optimism. We're optimistic, we have that hit of dopamine, we're running towards something, but eventually we tend to run out of steam. We may despair, we may trip, we may stumble, we may even resort back and saying, hey, this really isn't worth it after all, is it? We go back to simply protecting ourselves and making survival choices instead of thrive choices. So here's something I want to give to you. And I want you to think about this. And I want you to use this tomorrow. Use it right away. It certainly can be. I want to introduce you to something called BAP. B-A-P. BAP. And I'm going to break that down for you. It's called Brief Action Plans. You see, instead of getting overwhelmed and throwing back into the survive choices, we want to move toward the thrive choices that are based out of our values and based out of our goals and based out of the direction that we want to head. Now, if you were to just make a big sweeping goal in your life and said, I want to be fit, that's a good place to start. But how do we break that down into manageable chunks that we can use? Well, that's where BAP comes in handy. You see, if we say that we want to be fit, we could say that part of my fitness routine is I want to exercise more. Well, more is a good place to start, but what does more even mean? Well, it probably means more than what you're doing, but let's be a little bit reasonable about this. You see, sometimes when people make the survive choice when it comes to exercising, they develop this all or nothing mentality and they rush to the gym or do some workout they're not equipped to do, or they tax themselves and they wind up being sore and fatigued for the next 5 days. They throw in the towel and they say, this isn't worth it. And of course, who can blame that person? We've all been there. I've been there. But I've learned over time that that's not reasonable and it's not sustainable. See, a Thrive choice aligned with a BAP, a brief action plan, would simply say that I want to exercise more. So what does that look like? It looks like me starting tomorrow with walking for 20 minutes. It's brief, it's an action, and it's a plan. That's a Thrive choice, as opposed to a Survive choice. I'm simply aligning myself with my vision and my goals using a brief action plan. How does that sound to you? How does that help you move past making a Survive choice to a Thrive choice? Maybe you say you want to eat better. Well, that's a good place to start. But maybe that means that you want to reduce sugar in your life. Okay, now we're getting better, but let's see how this might relate to BAP. Let's say it might start tomorrow by saying, I'm not going to have that donut for breakfast. I'm going to make a wiser food choice. A brief action plan. That puts you in charge to not be a reactor, but more of a responder. I want to wish you the best as you continue to think about Thrive choices that can be born out of your values to help you build the life that you really crave.